Ancient Egyptians perfected wig maintenance with secrets lost for thousands of years. By the end of this, you will possess a collection of practical, ancient beauty tips you can apply to your own understanding of history and self-care. We will uncover how they kept elaborate wigs fresh without modern chemistry and what mysterious materials prevented pests and decay. What does it say about a civilization when even their hairstyles were built to last? A shaved head was the perfect canvas for these masterpieces of identity. Wigs in ancient Egypt served a purpose far beyond simple decoration. They were a clear and immediate signal of a person's place in the world. For the elite, a meticulously crafted wig was as essential as fine linen clothing or expensive jewelry. It announced your wealth, your power, and your purity. In a land dominated by a relentless sun, shaving one's natural hair was a practical measure against lice and the intense heat, but appearing bald in public was not considered dignified for a person of high status. The wig, therefore, became the solution, a symbol of civilization itself. It protected the sensitive scalp while projecting an image of impeccable grooming and control. Think of it not as hiding one's true self, but as adorning it with a second skin of social meaning. A priest might wear a specific style for temple rituals, while a noblewoman at a banquet would showcase an entirely different, more elaborate design. Their identity was literally woven into the fibers they wore, so when we talk about maintaining a wig, we are not discussing the care of a simple accessory. We are talking about the preservation of one's social armor, a vital component of how an individual moved through and was perceived by the world. This profound importance is why the methods for keeping these wigs pristine had to be nothing short of extraordinary. The very first line of defense for an Egyptian wig was a surprisingly simple yet powerful substance, natron. This was not merely a salt, but a true wonder material of the ancient world, harvested from the beds of dried lakes. Think of natron as the ancient equivalent of a multi-purpose cleaner, a desiccant, and a purifier all in one. It was the same substance used in the meticulous process of mummification to dry and preserve the bodies of the elite for eternity. Its application to wig care reveals a profound understanding of its properties. A solution of natron dissolved in water would have been gently applied to the wig's intricate fibers. This natron wash worked by breaking down the natural scalp oils and sweat that would have transferred to the wig base, effectively dissolving grease and lifting away any dust or debris from the complex hairstyle. It was a cleansing ritual that purified the wig without the harsh chemicals we know today. The goal was not to create a frothy lather, but to achieve a deep, fundamental cleanliness. This regular washing prevented the buildup that could lead to odor, matting, and ultimately, the deterioration of the precious materials. How often would a noblewoman or a priest have undergone this process? While we cannot know exact schedules, the importance of their appearance suggests it was a frequent and essential practice. Keeping a wig immaculate was an active, ongoing process, and natron provided the primary tool. But cleansing was only half the battle. Once a wig was washed and free of impurities, the next challenge was ensuring it did not become a home for unwelcome guests. This cleansing ritual was a careful, almost meditative process. First, the wig would be submerged in a shallow basin filled with a solution of water and finely ground natron. The mixture was not harsh or soapy, but it possessed a powerful alkaline quality that cut through grease. The wearer or a dedicated servant would then gently agitate the wig in the solution, allowing the natron to penetrate the dense layers of human hair or plant fibers. This gentle motion was crucial, loosening the accumulated grime, sweat, and fragrant oils without tangling or damaging the delicate construction. Think of it not as a vigorous scrubbing, but as a slow, deliberate unwinding of the day's impurities from each individual strand. After this cleansing soak, the wig was lifted and rinsed not once, but multiple times in clean, fresh water, most likely drawn directly from the life-giving Nile. This final rinse was essential to wash away every last trace of the natron and the dissolved dirt it carried. Any residue left behind could make the fibers brittle or attract dust once the wig was dry. The entire procedure, from the initial soak to the final clear rinse, was a preventative measure of the highest order. It was this meticulous attention to detail that stopped the slow, invisible decay caused by body oils and sweat, preserving these intricate pieces for years, and in some cases, for the eternity their owners so deeply believed in. The clean, rinsed wig was now ready for its next vital stage, a process that required as much patience and skill as the washing itself. With the impurities gone, the fibers were vulnerable, prone to tangling and breakage if handled roughly. This is where the ancient comb, an object of both simple utility and stunning artistry, took center stage. Archaeologists have unearthed these personal tools from tombs, crafted from rich ebony wood or gleaming elephant ivory, often with teeth so finely spaced you can still run your fingers over them today. They were not crude implements, but possessions of great value, worthy of accompanying their owners into the afterlife. Using such a comb was a deliberate, almost ritualistic act. The method was incredibly specific and speaks to a deep, practical wisdom. You would never start at the top of a dense, wet wig. Instead, the comb would begin its work at the very ends of the strands, gently easing out the smallest of snarls. Only after the ends were perfectly smooth would you move a little higher, methodically working upwards, section by section, until you finally reached the base of the wig. This technique prevented a single knot from tightening into an impossible mess, saving countless strands from being torn out. Think of the intricate braids, the complex curls, the layered styles we see in tomb paintings. Each of those elaborate designs depended entirely on this foundational step of meticulous detangling. A rushed job would have resulted in a frizzy, damaged masterpiece, a public display of neglect no elite Egyptian could afford. It was this slow, upward journey of the comb that preserved the wig's intended form, ensuring that every hairstyle remained a clear, sharp statement of identity and status, exactly as its wearer demanded. The comb in your hand was more than a tool, it was a precisely engineered solution. Its wide teeth were not an aesthetic choice, but a calculated design to navigate the incredible density of an elite wig. Picture trying to comb thick, tightly curled hair with a fine-toothed comb, the frustration and the inevitable pulling and breaking. The ancient artisans avoided this entirely. The generous space between each tooth of the comb allowed it to glide through the bundled fibers, separating knots without applying destructive force to individual strands. This design respected the wig's complex structure, whether it was made from thousands of human hairs or from resilient plant fibers like date palm. It was a form of preventative care built right into the object itself, ensuring that the very act of detangling did not become a source of damage. And then there was the material. A comb carved from cool, heavy ivory or from a dense, polished wood like ebony was not merely a display of wealth. These materials offered an exceptionally smooth, almost frictionless surface. Run your finger along the tooth of a cheap, splintered wooden comb, and you can feel the tiny ridges that catch and tear. Now imagine the flawless glide of ivory, a surface so polished that it met no resistance. It would not snag the delicate cuticle of a hair shaft, preserving its strength and natural sheen with every single stroke. This combination of intelligent design and luxurious material created the perfect instrument for maintenance. It was a daily reminder that in ancient Egypt, beauty and practicality were never separate pursuits. but two strands expertly woven into the same enduring tradition. Once the wig was clean, combed, and perfectly restored to order, it was ready for its final transformation. This was not a step of mere repair, but one of active nourishment and sensory delight. In the arid Egyptian climate, the constant threat was brittleness, the dry air leaching all moisture from organic fibers until they became fragile and prone to snapping. The solution was a sophisticated application of scented oils and fats. These were not simple greases, but carefully prepared concoctions designed to perform multiple functions at once. A base of high-quality animal fat or a rich plant oil would be gently warmed. Into this base, precious drops of essential fragrance were stirred, extracts painstakingly drawn from lotus blossoms, lilies, or the rare and costly resin of frankincense. The resulting balm was then meticulously worked through the wig, strand by strand, from the base to the very tips. This process did more than just make the wig smell pleasant, though the lingering aroma of flowers or exotic incense was a powerful statement of wealth and refinement in its own right. On a practical level, the oil or fat acted as a potent conditioner, sealing moisture into each hair shaft and creating a protective barrier against the harsh, dry environment. It replaced the natural scalp oils that the wig itself could not produce, keeping the entire construction supple, manageable, and radiant with a healthy-looking sheen. Can you picture a noblewoman at a gathering, the light catching the sleek, dark luster of her wig, while a subtle, elegant fragrance announces her presence even before she speaks? This final aromatic treatment turned a maintained object into a living part of her identity, a testament to a civilization that understood beauty as a complete experience for all the senses. We can reconstruct one such recipe from the ingredients found in tombs and depicted in temple reliefs. The base was likely a pure, rendered animal fat, something like goose fat, prized for its smooth, semi-solid consistency at room temperature. This fat provided the essential emollient properties, the substance that would coat each hair strand to prevent moisture loss, but a simple grease was not enough for the Egyptian elite. Into this warm, neutral base, a perfumer would carefully stir droplets of precious plant oils, perhaps extracted from the ben nut or from moringa seeds, known for their conditioning benefits. Then came the true artistry, the addition of fragrance. Small lumps of frankincense or myrrh resin would be dissolved into the mixture, infusing it with a sacred, long-lasting aroma. The final product was a multi-purpose pomade, a waxy, fragrant balm. A small amount of this concoction would be warmed between the palms and then worked meticulously through the wig from the roots to the ends. The effect was transformative. The fat imparted a brilliant, controllable shine, making the dark fibers gleam under the sun. It tamed flyaways and reduced the static that could plague such elaborate styles in the dry air. Most importantly, it acted as a light, natural holding agent. Think of a nobleman preparing for an audience with the pharaoh. He would apply this pomade not just for its scent, but to ensure every braided lock and coiled curl remained perfectly, impeccably in place for hours, a living sculpture of his status. This was the pinnacle of ancient hair care, a single treatment that combined deep conditioning, fragrant perfume, and functional styling power, all derived from the natural world they mastered so completely. This final step in the ritual reveals a profound truth about Egyptian priorities. A meticulously cleaned, conditioned, and styled masterpiece was far too valuable to be left exposed on a simple stand. For its protection between wearings, the wig required a home as carefully considered as its construction, a dedicated wooden chest. These specialized boxes, discovered resting in tombs beside their owners, were not mere containers. They were sealed environments designed to shield the intricate hairstyle from the relentless threats of dust, curious insects, and accidental crushing. A single misplaced object could flatten a delicate braid or unravel a complex curl, undoing hours of careful maintenance. The box acted as a portable sanctuary. Its solid wooden walls formed a physical barrier against the world, preserving the wig's intended shape and volume perfectly. Imagine a noblewoman's servant lifting the lid to reveal the creation inside, as pristine and perfectly formed as the moment it was put away. This was not just storage, it was an act of preservation, a promise that the social armor would be ready for its next performance. The very existence of these custom-made containers underscores the wig's role as a permanent, essential component of a person's identity, an object worthy of its own dedicated space, safeguarded for the future, both in this life and the next. These protective boxes were masterpieces of practical design. The choice of a cylindrical or rectangular shape was far from arbitrary. A cylindrical case, for instance, allowed a long, braided wig to be coiled neatly inside without creating sharp, damaging folds. A rectangular box, on the other hand, provided a stable home for a wider, more voluminous style with complex curls that needed to maintain their shape without being compressed. The exteriors of these containers were often works of art themselves, inlaid with precious ivory or decorated with scenes of gods and goddesses, transforming a simple storage item into a statement of luxury. But the true genius lay in where these beautiful boxes were placed within the home. They were never left out in the open. Instead, they were stored in a specific, carefully chosen location, a cool and dry spot away from the sun-baked walls or the dampness of the Nile's breeze. This was a critical, deliberate strategy. Excessive heat would have melted the precious scented fats coating the wig, creating a sticky, rancid mess. High humidity, meanwhile, was an invitation to mold and mildew, which could permanently stain the fibers and weaken their very structure. By controlling the wig's environment even when it was not being worn, the ancient Egyptians enacted a powerful form of passive preservation. This simple act of selecting the right storage place ensured that the countless hours spent washing, combing, and anointing the wig were not undone by a single season of neglect. It was a final, quiet layer of defense in a comprehensive system of care, a testament to a culture that understood preservation as a continuous duty, guarding their most personal possessions against the relentless passage of time itself. Yet even within the safety of its storage box, the wig faced its ultimate test during public appearances. The harsh Egyptian elements were relentless enemies of such delicate creations. The unyielding sun did more than just beat down, it actively degraded the materials. Prolonged exposure to direct sunlight could cause the rich, dark dyes, often derived from plants like henna or indigo, to fade noticeably, turning a vibrant statement of wealth into a washed-out shadow. And then there was the sand. A gentle desert breeze carried countless microscopic particles, each one a tiny, sharp-edged abrasive. Imagine these fine grains embedding themselves deep within the complex layers of a wig. Every slight movement of the head, every turn, would create a subtle grinding action, like a slow-acting sandpaper slowly wearing down the hair shafts, making them dull and brittle over time. This was a battle fought not in grand gestures, but in the invisible, cumulative damage of daily life. The solution was as elegant as it was practical. When venturing outdoors, especially during a sandstorm or the peak heat of the day, an elite Egyptian would often drape a fine linen headscarf or a shawl directly over the wig. This simple layer of fabric became a shield. It filtered the harsh ultraviolet rays, preserving the wig's color, and created a physical barrier that stopped the abrasive sand from ever reaching the precious fibers beneath. This was not an attempt to hide their status symbol, but to protect it. The headscarf was a mobile extension of the storage box, a portable sanctuary that allowed the wearer to navigate the world without sacrificing the longevity of their most prized personal possession. It reveals a sophisticated understanding of preventative care, a recognition that true maintenance extends beyond the private ritual into the public sphere, guarding against the silent, creeping threats of the natural world. This practical wisdom extended even to the most active moments of an Egyptian's life, a noble overseeing construction on his estate or a priest participating in a long, ceremonial procession would still be expected to present an impeccable appearance. Yet these very activities pose the greatest risk to a delicate wig, threatening the hours of meticulous care with a single gust of wind or a cloud of kicked-up dust. The solution was a brilliant compromise between social obligation and practical preservation. For these occasions, the elite would often switch to a simpler, more securely fastened wig, or they would employ their headscarves with greater purpose. Tying the linen cloth more snugly around the head and over the primary wig created a form of functional headwear. This was not a fashion choice, but a calculated maneuver. It anchored the entire construction, preventing a sudden desert wind from catching the elaborate curls and pulling the wig loose in a moment of profound social embarrassment. More importantly, it sealed the wig away from the heavy perspiration of physical exertion. Body sweat, with its salts and acidity, could quickly degrade the scented oils and fats, leading to an unpleasant odor and a sticky, matted mess that would require another full natron cleansing. By adapting their approach based on their daily activity, the Egyptians demonstrated that true maintenance was not a rigid set of rules, but a dynamic, intelligent response to their environment. It was about anticipating problems before they could ever arise. How many of our own modern beauty routines could benefit from this same forward-thinking philosophy, where protection is woven seamlessly into the fabric of our daily lives? The true secret behind those gravity-defying masterpieces in tomb paintings lies in the ancient world's answer to super-hold styling gel. To achieve the towering layers, intricate braids, and perfect curls that seem to defy logic, Egyptian artisans turned to the most reliable adhesives nature could provide: beeswax and tree resins. These were not simply smeared on, but carefully prepared in small pots over a low flame. The beeswax would be gently melted and often blended with the sticky sap of an acacia tree or a similar resin. This created a thick, pliable substance that could be worked with while warm. A stylist would then dip their fingers or a narrow tool into this warm, aromatic blend and apply it strategically to specific sections of the wig. They would coat the base of a braid to keep it tightly bound, or run a thin line along the edge of a curl to lock its shape permanently. This was the final, crucial step that transformed a clean, conditioned wig into an architectural wonder. The hold was formidable, capable of keeping every strand in its designated place through hours of ceremony, or even through the heat of a bustling marketplace. It provided the structural integrity for the most ambitious hairstyles, proving that ancient fashion was as much about engineering as it was about aesthetics. But this powerful hold came with its own challenge, a challenge that reveals just how deep their maintenance wisdom truly went. Applying that stiff, aromatic wax was a high-stakes art form. Too little meant a style that drooped and lost its shape under the hot sun, a public failure of presentation, but too much created a different kind of disaster, a stiff, helmet-like appearance that looked heavy and unnatural, completely betraying the desired illusion of effortless elegance. The solution was in the application, a technique of strategic placement. A skilled servant would not slather the entire wig. Instead, they would warm a tiny amount of the beeswax and resin blend between their palms and then work it with precision, focusing only on the areas that needed maximum support. They would run a thin, nearly invisible line along the part of a braid, or dab a minuscule amount at the root of a curl to anchor it. The goal was to create an internal scaffolding, a hidden architecture of hold that left the outer layers of hair feeling soft and moving naturally. This delicate balance is why the most elaborate wigs were the work of true masters, artisans who understood that the best styling aid is the one you never notice. But what happens when the celebration ends and the wig must be prepared for its next wearing? This powerful hold had to be completely undone without damaging a single strand. The removal process was just as deliberate as the application. They would gently warm a light, neutral oil, perhaps a simple sesame or castor oil, and massage it thoroughly through the styled hair. This oil acted as a solvent, breaking down the waxy bonds and dissolving the sticky resin. The old styling product would literally melt away, suspended in the oil, ready to be lifted out. This crucial step prevented the destructive buildup that would otherwise clog the wig's base and make future cleansing with natron nearly impossible. It was a complete cycle of care, from the strategic application that built the style to the gentle dissolution that cleared the canvas, ensuring the masterpiece could be recreated again and again, forever perfect, forever ready. Even the most resilient colors would eventually surrender to the unrelenting Egyptian sun. For a society that viewed appearance as a direct reflection of order and stability, a faded wig was more than a cosmetic flaw, it was a crack in the facade. This is why the periodic renewal of color was not a mere vanity, but a necessary ritual of restoration. They turned to the palette provided by their own land, using plants like henna to impart rich, reddish-brown tones, or indigo leaves to achieve deep, blue blacks. The process was a careful alchemy. Henna leaves would be dried and ground into a fine, greenish powder. This powder was then mixed with a slightly acidic liquid, perhaps lemon juice or a weak vinegar, to create a thick, muddy paste. This paste was not simply painted on, it was carefully applied, section by section, to the clean, dry wig fibers. The wig would then be wrapped and left for hours, allowing the laws of nature to take over. The dye molecules from the henna would slowly migrate into the hair shaft, bonding with the protein itself to create a color that was not a surface coating, but a part of the fiber. The result was a translucent, warm hue that added depth and dimension, a far cry from the flat, opaque colors of modern dyes. This was not about hiding the wig's age, but about rejuvenating its very essence, bringing it back to its intended state of vibrant, lifelike presentation. It was a cycle of renewal as predictable as the Nile's flood, ensuring that a person's social armor never appeared weary or worn, but perpetually fresh, powerful, and in harmony with the eternal order they sought to emulate. This ritual of renewal began with the careful preparation of the dye bath itself. A ceramic pot would hold the vibrant mixture, a thick paste of crushed henna leaves or powdered indigo, blended with a mild acid like sour wine or citrus juice to help open the hair's structure and lock the color in. The process was methodical and slow, a world away from a simple dip and rinse. A servant or the wearer would not submerge the entire wig at once. Instead, they would take small, manageable sections, carefully coating each braid or lock in the rich, earthy paste before wrapping it in a strip of linen. This section-by-section approach ensured that every single fiber received an even, saturated application, guaranteeing a uniform and deeply penetrating color that would not blotch or fade unevenly. The wrapped wig would then be left to rest for hours, sometimes even an entire day, as the natural dyes worked their magic, slowly bonding with the very protein of the hair. The final reveal, after the linen was unwound and the paste rinsed away, was a transformation. It was not a mask of color, but a revitalization, restoring the wig's original symbolic power. The choice of hue was never arbitrary. A deep blue-black wig, achieved with indigo, was a direct statement of youth and virility, its darkness mimicking the lush, fertile silt of the Nile after the annual flood. It spoke of a life force in its prime, of strength and potency. A reddish-brown tone from henna carried its own connotations, often associated with the sun's life-giving energy and with joy. To maintain the color of a wig was to actively maintain one's place in the social hierarchy, to reject the visual signs of aging and decline. It was a declaration that the individual, like the civilization itself, was in a perpetual state of renewal, forever aligned with the vibrant, enduring forces of life. Even the most carefully guarded wig could not escape the wear and tear of daily life, a single strand snapping under the comb, a small section fraying from constant friction against a headrest. These were not reasons for despair, but for skilled intervention. These elaborate pieces were far too valuable to discard over minor damage. Instead, they were treated like fine textiles or cherished furniture, worthy of meticulous restoration. The process was one of delicate reweaving. A skilled hand, perhaps the household servant who maintained the wig, or a specialized craftsperson, would take a few strands of matching human hair or the same resilient plant fiber from which the wig was originally made. Using a fine bone or bronze needle, they would carefully stitch these new fibers directly into the wig's foundational base, a tight mesh of linen or leather. This was not a crude patch job. The goal was absolute invisibility. The new hairs were woven to follow the exact direction and pattern of the existing style, whether that was a tight braid, a soft curl, or a simple, straight fall. A successful repair was one that was completely undetectable to anyone but the artisan who performed it. This practice ensured that the social statement of the wig remained perfectly intact. A noble could wear their most elaborate piece for years, confident that its appearance of flawless, unchanging perfection was being actively maintained, stitch by invisible stitch, against the inevitable passage of time. The tools for this delicate restoration were as precise as the work itself. A fine needle, carved from a sliver of animal bone, was the primary instrument, its tip sharp enough to pierce the wig's linen or leather foundation without splitting the delicate threads. This needle was threaded not with ordinary flax, but with an even finer, stronger material, a thread spun from animal sinew or from the resilient fibers of a plant-like papyrus. These choices were deliberate. A metal needle might have been too thick or too harsh, risking damage to the existing structure, while a sinew thread, when pulled taut, would bind and become incredibly durable, mimicking the strength of the hair it was anchoring. The process was one of immense patience. The artisan would first isolate the area of loss, a small gap in a braid or a thinning section near the temple. Then, taking a few strands of matching replacement hair, they would use the bone needle to stitch these new fibers directly into the base network of the wig. Each tiny stitch was a calculated act, replicating the original direction, tension, and pattern of the surrounding hair. The true mastery was in the finish, where the ends of the new hairs were seamlessly blended into the old, creating a repair that was undetectable to the eye and the touch. This was not a crude patch, but a genuine renewal, a practice that treated these elaborate wigs not as disposable fashion, but as heirlooms. In a world without mass production, every object carried the weight of the labor required to create it. To mend a wig so perfectly was to declare its enduring value, a sustainable philosophy where beauty was maintained through skill and reverence, not replaced through waste. But that beautiful wooden box, for all its protection, could become a trap. A sealed environment, safe from dust and crushing, was also a perfect, dark hiding place for the most persistent of ancient nuisances, lice. These tiny pests were a constant, unwelcome threat in a world without modern insecticides, and an infested wig was a social and hygienic catastrophe of the highest order. The solution, however, was not to wage war after an invasion, but to prevent one from ever happening. This is where a final, brilliant layer of preventative care came into play, one that engaged the sense of smell as a powerful guardian. Inside the wig box, resting beside the coiled masterpiece, would be a small linen sachet, a pouch filled not with perfume, but with a strategic blend of pungent, aromatic herbs. Think of mint with its sharp, clean fragrance, or thyme, earthy and potent. Most effective of all was a plant called fleabane, a name that tells you everything you need to know about its ancient reputation. These were not chosen for their pleasant aromas alone, but for their power as natural repellents. The strong, volatile oils released by the crushed leaves and flowers created an invisible, aromatic barrier inside the box. To allow seeking a new home, this scented environment was utterly hostile, an olfactory field of warning signs that drove them away. This was pest control through botanical intelligence, a way of making the wig's sanctuary actively defensive. It ensured that when the lid was lifted, the only thing that greeted the wearer was the anticipated scent of beeswax and lotus, a promise of purity and readiness, with no unwelcome surprises lying in wait. Crafting one of these protective sachets was a small ritual in itself. First, bundles of fresh mint or sprigs of pungent fleabane would be gathered and left to dry completely in the shade, a process that concentrated their essential oils and intensified their repellent power. Once brittle, the leaves and flowers were carefully crushed by hand, releasing their sharp, earthy fragrance into the air. This aromatic powder was then spooned onto a small square of clean, finely woven linen. The cloth was drawn up and securely tied with a twist of flax string, creating a little pouch that was both permeable and contained. This was the final, crucial step, as a simple pile of loose herbs would have created a messy, dusty residue inside the precious wig box. The sachet was then placed with intention, not just tossed in. It might be nestled beside the coiled braids or tucked gently beneath the wig's base, ensuring the protective scent would rise and permeate the entire enclosed space. This was pest control through pure botanical intelligence, a chemical-free solution that turned a simple storage container into an actively defensive environment. It highlights a profound, sophisticated understanding of their world, where every plant held a potential purpose, and every problem, no matter how small, could be solved by a thoughtful application of nature's own pharmacy. The very linen that protected a wig from the desert sun could become its enemy in the wrong conditions. This is the final, critical piece of the preservation puzzle, a delicate dance with an invisible force, humidity. The Egyptians possessed a keen, almost instinctual understanding that their cleansing rituals, while essential, created a moment of profound vulnerability. A freshly washed wig, its fibers saturated with Nile water, could not be sealed away in its beautiful box while still holding even a trace of that moisture. To do so would be to lock in the very thing that invited decay. They knew that dampness trapped in a dark, enclosed space was an open invitation to mold and mildew. These fungal growths would not just create a musty, unpleasant odor that no amount of scented oil could mask, they would actively feast on the organic materials, whether human hair or plant fiber, slowly breaking down their structure until the wig itself became weak, discolored, and brittle. Think of a forgotten loaf of bread left in a damp cupboard, how quickly it becomes speckled with green and white. The same destructive process would have attacked a precious wig stored with careless haste. This is why the final stage of washing was not the rinse, but the wait. A cleaned wig would be left in a shaded, well-ventilated area of the home, perhaps on a dedicated stand, allowing the dry desert air to naturally and completely wick every last bit of moisture from its deepest layers before it was ever considered ready for its protective case. They were fighting an invisible clock, and their weapon was patience, ensuring that the sanctuary of the box preserved perfection, not accelerated ruin. This constant awareness of moisture reveals a civilization that thought like conservators. They understood that preservation was not a single act, but a continuous, responsive relationship with their environment. The final and perhaps most easily overlooked step in their routine was this period of patient air drying. A wig, still damp from its natron wash and final rinse, would be placed on a simple wooden stand in a shaded, airy corner of the home. It was a deliberate location, chosen with purpose. Direct sunlight was the enemy here, as it could bake the fibers, making them brittle and causing any applied dyes to fade prematurely. But a stagnant, enclosed room was just as dangerous. The goal was a gentle, consistent airflow, allowing the naturally dry atmosphere to slowly and completely wick the water away. This was not a process to be rushed. A servant might even gently turn the wig on its stand throughout the day, ensuring that no single section, especially the dense inner layers closest to the base, remained trapped in dampness. They were performing a delicate balancing act, cleansing the wig of one threat, body oils and dirt, while vigilantly guarding against the next, the silent creep of mold. How long would this take? Perhaps an entire day, or even longer during the more humid months when the Nile flooded its banks. This was the ultimate test of their preventative philosophy, a quiet, unhurried ritual that stood between a masterpiece and its ruin. Behind every perfectly coiled braid and fragrant lock was a dedicated pair of hands. For the Egyptian elite, the elaborate ritual of wig care was not a personal chore, but a responsibility entrusted to skilled household servants or specialized artisans. This delegation was itself a powerful symbol of status. The ability to have another person devote hours to the meticulous cleansing, combing, and anointing of a single accessory was a clear demonstration of wealth and power. It ensured that every step of the process was performed not just adequately, but to an impeccable standard. A noblewoman did not need to master the art of stitching new hairs into a linen base or know the exact moment to add frankincense to a beeswax blend. Her role was to present the finished masterpiece, a walking testament to the silent, expert labor that supported her position. The servant, in turn, was the guardian of that social armor, their skill directly reflecting upon their master's place in the world. A poorly maintained wig would have been a mark of shame not just for the wearer, but for the entire household, revealing a breakdown in the order and discipline that defined elite life. This division of labor created a system where perfection was not an aspiration, but an expectation meticulously upheld by unseen experts. These ancient rituals offer more than just a historical curiosity, they provide a timeless blueprint for care. The Egyptian approach was built on three powerful pillars: natural ingredients, preventative maintenance, and thoughtful storage, principles that feel remarkably modern in our world of disposable products. Consider their use of natron, a simple salt, for cleansing, or beeswax and plant oils for conditioning. They turned to the earth for solutions, avoiding the complex, often harsh chemicals that fill our shelves today. This invites a question for our own routines. Could we simplify? Might a shift toward more natural, single-ingredient treatments bring a new level of health and vitality to our own hair, just as it did for theirs? It is a call to look at the resources around us with fresh eyes, to see the potential in simple, time-tested elements. Their philosophy was not about quick fixes, but about sustained, gentle upkeep that preserved the integrity of the object itself. This mindset transforms maintenance from a chore into a respectful ritual, a way of honoring the things we own by ensuring their longevity. The Egyptian who carefully stored their wig in a custom box understood that true value is protected not just by how you use something, but by how you put it away. Applying this today could mean anything from properly storing our own cherished items to simply being more mindful of the environments we expose them to. It is about building a culture of care where we invest a little effort regularly to avoid the need for major repair later. This ancient wisdom encourages us to slow down, to treat our possessions not as temporary conveniences, but as artifacts of our own lives, worthy of preservation. In their meticulous daily attention, we find a powerful alternative to our throwaway culture, a reminder that the most enduring forms of beauty are always, without exception, well maintained. From natron baths to scented oil conditioners, the ancient Egyptians were true pioneers of hair care, developing a holistic system that modern science is only now fully appreciating. Their methods reveal a profound grasp of chemistry, using alkaline salts to cleanse and natural fats to condition, long before these concepts had scientific names. Their aesthetic sense was equally advanced, crafting styles that communicated identity and status with every braid and curl, but perhaps their most enduring wisdom was in practical preservation, a philosophy of proactive care that protected their masterpieces from the relentless threats of sun, sand, and time. This was not vanity, but a deep-seated cultural value placed on order, beauty, and permanence. We hope this journey into ancient beauty secrets has given you a new perspective on the artistry of everyday life in the past. Which of these meticulous maintenance tips surprised you the most? Was it the use of natron as a purifying wash, or the strategic application of beeswax to build architectural styles? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery with us, please subscribe for more insights into the lost wisdom of ancient civilizations.